People who have known victims of crimes that have appeared in the media. What happened after the media lost their interest in broadcasting? Not what you intended regarding crime. But here goes. In the early 90s, several members of my family were killed by an extremely drunk driver in the mid-morning rain. The drunk died too. But the one surviving relative, parent of 2 little girls who died on impact, lived but was left quadriplegic. She got a lot of media attention for about 10 years or so. The media used her, not exploitatively, as a cautionary tale and feel-good story, due to her PT recovery work, and she developed a lasting friendship with a specific reporter. My relative went on to raise 2 more little girls who are now young adults. Airbags, shoulder straps, and child safety seats might have saved them all. Hopefully the media's highlighting of their story changed some minds and influenced viewers to think about their family's safety. Buckle up and keep your kids protected. My cousin was killed by a man she went on a date with, and there was some media attention. She had just divorced after a 20+ year marriage, and he was the first guy she had a date with. The date didn't go well and she politely denied a second one. He showed up at her house really late, yelling and banging on the door so loudly a neighbor called police. She opened the door. He shot her twice and then himself. Media didn't report he didn't die instantly like she did. Medevac came out, but he was so far gone they didn't load him in. He died at the scene. I know someone who was a teacher who supposedly hit a kid, and there was a big media to do about it around here. She lost her job and works in a grocery store now. She was never found guilty, but it ruined her career. I taught a boy whose mother was a teacher accused of hitting 2 boys. She was never charged with a crime nor proven guilty, but it ruined her career as well. It was so hard on the family. Her son struggled for years. My very young cousin was abducted and murdered, and the police had tunnel vision for my aunt. It ended up being 2 people completely unrelated to us. The media was constantly painting my aunt in a bad light. Social media made it worse because every Joe Blow and Jane Doe Facebook detective was on the case, theorizing why she was the killer and bringing up our family's criminal history. This actually prolonged the investigation because they were so focused on my aunt, even going as far as to hire actors to get her to confess to them. The media dropped it as quickly as they had picked it up after the 2 scumbags went on trial. My aunt doesn't talk to anyone anymore and always asks for handouts on social media. My uncle, however, started a charity in my cousin's name and works to keep child murderers behind bars. I was the victim of assault by an NFL player a few years ago. I didn't know who he was when it happened. I was at work and called the police on him. It was a circus. The media called my parents and told them what happened before I got a chance to. I refused to let them release a video of the incident. I was made out to be a gold digger and all sorts of other things online. I never got a dime or any justice even. He was given like 3 hours of community service. I was relieved when it was all over. My life went back to normal and I was able to safely be at my home and work without fearing reporters harassing me. I do want to say that it has greatly changed my perspective on how the media treats victims and celebrities. The story that is presented online is usually far from what actually happens to victims and gets too many personal irrelevant details involved. And blaming a victim is always wrong. They didn't ask to be a victim. And often they just wish their life would be whole again. My ex-girlfriend was shot in the head and raped by her mother's boyfriend. He also shot her sister, her dog, and her mother. Then he jumped in front of a train. All in one night. Everyone survived except for the dog and the mom. Don't ask me how she laid in bed for days and didn't die. The EMTs say it's because she clotted well. Now she's just a regular girl, making it in the world. Life is pretty normal for her. Except for like the PTSD. You know. A local D-list celebrity in my small town had his house broken into so kids could throw a party. The story made national news even though he twisted the story to be way worse than it actually was. He claimed his house was trashed, but in reality his $1 million home was already falling apart and in foreclosure before the party. The graffiti on his property was actually done years before by his kids and their friends with his permission. Anyways, people across the country felt bad for him, so they sent him donations that he claimed he was going to put towards helping the kids who ruined his home. Years later, where did that money go? He kept all the money for himself and the kids or community didn't see a cent of it. I'm not saying the kids or community deserved the money, but he turned a bad day for himself into a way to scam a bunch of money from people all across the country. He made himself out to be this humble victim with a big heart. But once the media lost interest, he took the money and ran. I think he lives far away in Florida now. A friend of mine was murdered in high school. It was all over the news and there is a lot of speculation as to what happened. This lasted about a week, and as soon as all the hysteria died down, they ruled her death a suicide. Not a shred of evidence points to her committing suicide. Literally nothing matches up. The media started digging up more records and they reopened the case recently. But now that the media is dying down again, they haven't been working on the case at all. Funny how that works. It was only local media. But I knew both the victims and the perpetrator of a double homicide. The perpetrator was a friend and high school classmate. He murdered his grandparents. He fled to Mexico in their car. He turned himself in days later. And he went to prison for maybe 30 years or so. He got married while in prison. He is out. No idea if they're still married or what he is up to now. I don't want to know him. I hope he got help for whatever his problems were and that he lives productively now. If only for those who must live near him. All the attention after a shooting usually focuses on the dead. But people injured by firearms can have very long, very painful physical recoveries and are often never the same. The mental recovery is just as bad or worse. If anyone needs an example, look at Gabby Giffords. She was shot in 2011 in Tucson. And her DNC 2020 speech was the longest monologue she's given since. She's clearly not the same woman she was before. But she's certainly a fighter. In 2016, my sister was murdered in a robbery gone wrong on vacation a week before she was supposed to come home. The local news wrote article after article about her murder and twisted the facts around. Journalists asking for interviews over and over when one of the most important people in your life was just murdered felt like an insult. And then they just forgot. It started up again during the trial and sentencing. But we were finally able to grieve once they were gone. I feel so bad for families who lose loved ones. Not just because of how painful it is, but because of vile the media can be to the families who just want to grieve. I don't know if this was in the media or not because none of my siblings were born yet. But I don't think it'd be easy to forget my uncle tying my dad to a tree naked. Or that same uncle tying my other biological uncle to a hang glider that's attached to a four-wheeler. He was also in a TV special in 2005 titled The Dumbest Criminals in America. I was not a victim luckily. But I had a high school teacher arrested for CP&R pay of a very young child. This is about 10 years ago. There was quite some media attention but his name was redacted. He got caught jerking off during a children's tennis tournament. Later more came out like watching CP at school and raping a very young child. My school got in the news. He didn't really. What I don't understand about the media is that it was quite big back then. But mostly just talked about my schooler. While he deserves his name out there linked to his crimes, I know that he is out of prison and teaching music to people. I don't know if he is teaching children. I pray to God he isn't. But I do know he is out and about even with a music teaching website and all. If you do something that's terrible you deserve to never be able to work again. That deserves media attention so you'll never be able to live a normal life. Her baby was murdered by the dad's new girlfriend. It was set up like a home invasion. But the truth came out. The girlfriend was sentenced to life imprisonment. 15 years later, mom is living in a small town. Has 2 more kids. She has moved on. Every so often there is a follow-up article. The West Mesa murders. One of the girls was my husband's sister. Found buried on the mesa. 11 girls and 1 fetus in 2009. Murderer never caught. probably will never be. Not much of an aftermath story. The families all continued on with their lives and media coverage usually happens on an anniversary. A park was built for them in memory. 11 trees planted for each girl. To this day no one talks about it. Crippling depression and PTSD. And a lot of anger. A friend's ex-wife and their 10-year-old daughter were viciously murdered by the ex-wife then ex-boyfriend. It took about 10 more years for him to touch anything in the little girl's room. Birthday presents were still laid out as she was coming back from her visitation with mom. Truly horrific and heartbreaking. We had 2 large scandals at the end of my senior year of high school. 2 weeks before graduation. The principal stepped down to spend more time with his family. Of course. The entire student body found this incredibly sus. It eventually came out that he had an affair with one of the teachers. And she had ended it. One night after a lurid of alcohol. He went to her house and climbed up a window on the ladder. Except, you know, he was drunk. So he peeped into her high school age daughter's bedroom. I'm not entirely sure what he is up to now. The other scandal was our choir director. They went on their annual choir trip. And apparently he forced all of the girls to change on the charter bus while he was still on it. I was in choir for a couple of years but quit my senior year after he accused me of drug abuse after I returned from an institution for, not happy thoughts time. There were rumors of him groping multiple female students. Which I wholeheartedly believe. He was fired. Sold cars for a little bit. And now he's a teacher again. My friend ended up on the news after police coming into the school to arrest him for rape. He just turned 18. So I think the media took interest in the high school rapist. Until it came out that she lied to her parents about him raping her because her father was racist and she didn't want him to know she was sexually involved with a black guy. IDR what happened with the case. Just that he was gone for a few months. He's happily married with kids now. My 6-year half-sister was killed by her biological father who then committed suicide. My family had asked the police and media to not publish the details of what went down, except the strict minimum for their public records, but they released all the informations anyway. It brought a lot of unwanted attention from other newspapers and the public to us in a time where we just wanted to grieve in peace and not be reminded of it every single day with a new article in trash tabloids. Exploiting and adding new sordid details to the story. Eventually they moved on to other news but it still did a lot of damage in my family. I was barely a teenager when it happened so my parents didn't tell me all the details but they were quite easy to find online. I wish I hadn't had access to those at that time. One of my mom's childhood friends was murdered by her ex-husband after she wouldn't take him back. He got life without parole. It got some coverage in the news around here. But it wasn't a national news story. It was absolutely horrific on the family. All of their kids lost both parents that day. My mom went to the funeral and she said there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Surviving victim here. Pretty much. Nothing. After some years. It's business as usual. Even family don't talk about it. At all. I mean. You're the center of attention for a while. Is invited to interviews and photos with police officers and such. But soon it's life as usual. Once a TV show wanted to do an in-depth of cases of. In my home state I refused an interview. They used old footage anyway. Got in the spotlight for another couple of weeks. And that's it. If I got some trauma, I worked with some mental pros. And time helps to heal. She was the sole survivor of her whole family slain. My BFF little sister. Understandably she disappeared a while to heal. She got adopted by another family in town who were protective. Eventually finished school and college. I hear she's still in the area 20 plus years later. I hope she's doing well. My family knew this other family and one day they were killed by an arson attack. Someone set their house on fire. The mother and her 5 children passed away. Only the father survived. My dad was on the news constantly and at one point our family was on the news. I was 10 at the time, I'm now 18. For a couple of years my dad spoke on the death anniversary. But soon they stopped broadcasting as the case has gone cold and still is cold till this day. There was a mass shooting at my college when I was a student. The first few weeks were insane with media attention and random people from all over the country flocking to campus. It was a surreal time. After that, for the most part, life went back to normal. The college gave out degrees to victims posthumously. There are remembrance events every year. Many of my friends struggled with survivor's guilt and were easily triggered by subsequent events or noises that could be gunshots. The college erred over reporting events and suspicious activity after the shooting. So we'd all get text message alerts that would freak us out. There's a mundane detail that I always notice now though. After the shooting they changed every set of double doors on campus so they couldn't be chained shut. I always take note of double door handles now. Not exactly the victim, but I was very close with the sister of a girl convicted of killing her baby when she was 15. The baby was found frozen in a cornfield in the middle of winter. She claimed it was stillborn, that she panicked and tried to hide it. After she went to prison, the media still dogged the family like crazy. We were young middle schoolers at the time, but reporters would follow my friend home after getting off the bus, trying to get her to comment on her sister. It got so bad they moved out of their house and in with my friend's grandparents for 2 years. By the time things calmed down with reporters, the sister was up for parole and her name was right back in the media. It was a nightmare. Eater. The story was a tragedy all around. I will say though, some good did come out of it. As a result of this case, our state adopted its first safe haven law. Now any mother can drop off a newborn to a hospital, fire station, police station or church anonymously without fear of consequence. It has saved countless infants' lives. A girl I went to high school with was involved in a high-profile attempted murder case in our town. Her dad killed her mom and stabbed my classmate. I'm pretty sure the dad killed himself but I really don't know. She survived, moved away but not too far away that she still frequently sees her friends from when we were all in school together. I used to see her at the store I work at every now and then and she seemed to be doing well years after the fact. I really hope life dealt her better cards after that. She was such a nice girl. Given the fact she was really young and how horrific the story was, the media seemed to back off and just let her go and do her thing, which I'm glad because typically you hear about small towns doing the opposite. A friend from back in high school was kidnapped, taken across the country, beaten with a bat, raped, and severely abused overall. He wouldn't let her shower and had all these weird rules. He fell asleep at some point and my friend was able to escape and get help. She was featured on one of those true crime shows. I think it was I Shouldn't Be Alive. We aren't close anymore, but from her FB posts it would appear that she is still really FK'd up from it. There was an Indian family who lived in my hometown. The youngest son was one of my fiance's best friends in the 90s. The oldest son in the family moved to another state because he married a black woman, which his father didn't approve of. In 2000, 2 men broke into their house while oldest son was at work and strangled his wife with a vacuum cleaner cord in front of their 7-month-old daughter. She was left unharmed. It appeared to be a break and gone wrong, though they didn't take anything. 6 years later, the 2 killers were caught in another state for committing a different crime. They admitted that they were hired as hitmen by the young black woman's Phil to kill her. He was tried and sentenced to life in prison without parole. To this day, he shows no remorse and openly hates black people. The youngest son, the one who was friends with my fiancé, is still in complete denial that his father had that woman killed because of her race. The victim's parents ended up adopting their granddaughter because her father could not go on without his wife. Very sad story. My mother was seriously injured in the London bombings. Obviously there was a lot of media attention over the following weeks, with details of the attacks and names of the victims. From a personal point of view, it was a bizarre time. Mum was taken to a nearby hospital and members of the press were posing as relatives to gain access to the IQ. Once we found out where she was, it took 3 days and much excellent detective work by the liaison officers sent to us. We had to show ID every time we went up. As the press figured out that most victims who had been seriously injured were returning home a few months later, they started showing up at our door. We lived in a quiet street at the time with a few residential bobbies, so they were chased away fairly quickly, but I remember going to school and strangers waiting outside the house asking if anyone was at home for an interview. No idea how they found our address. My parents did do a few national interviews and appearances. But really after the 1-year anniversary, it all slowed down. They move overseas and occasionally get questioned about her missing limb. To adults she skims past it. To children she is bionic woman. And a memory that's missing a few. Well, memories. Life is very much as it would have been. I think we all play the what if card every now and again. But Mama is very much of the everything happens for a reason mindset. As she's the one that got blown up. We kind of have to follow that example.